Thank you for joining for this episode of the TechSpective Podcast. I have with me Hed Kovetz. Hed, if you want to kind of give some background on yourself.
Hey, Tony. Thank you. It's great to be here. So my name is Hed Kovetz. I'm the CEO and one of the founders at Silverfort, the unified identity protection company. Before that, I've been in cybersecurity since I was 18 on the intelligence community, so cyber offense for several years as a researcher and a team leader and a group leader. And then after that, I worked as a product manager for cybersecurity products, did some projects for governments, so went to a few countries around the world to help design their national security architecture, and then started Silverfort about 8 years ago with two co-founders.
Okay. Well, so I guess let's kind of start with when you talk about kind of being having the background of kind of being on the cyber offense side. I mean, I've seen that in a number of organizations, a number of founders who've come from, whatever military intelligence backgrounds where they've been on the side of, cyber offense, and it gives, I think it's telling that so many from that background go on to found companies, because I think it shows that you've got the firsthand insight of kind of like, well, what is the tools, tactics, and procedures? What is the chain of events that has to happen for an attacker to establish a footprint and do some reconnaissance and move laterally through the network and all of those things. And when you're used to thinking that way, then it helps you to kind of flip it around and say, okay, well, how do I stop that?
Exactly. I think that you definitely get an understanding of what is not working in terms of the security controls that people are using, right? And I also think that it's being on the cyber offense side is a place where you really learn how to be very creative, because I think that is one thing that you need when you're on that side. You need to think out of the box and overcome very complex challenges and think very creatively. So when you take that approach to the defense side, part of it is, I think, that you try to challenge the way things are done, both because that these things can be bypassed and overcame, but also you try to bring this fresh approach. So yeah, I also know a lot of friends and other co-founders who come from this background, and that is also what led me specifically to the problem that I'm focused on today of identity security, because that's where I kind of noticed that it's just a problem that is not being solved in most companies. Well,
so let's talk some about that, because I've said for a number of years that I consider identity security to kind of be the foundation, the front line. Like if I can get your identity, then I can get anything else pretty much. Yeah. And one of the things that I think, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts, but one of the things that I think that a lot of people don't really think about or understand is that user identity is like the tip of the iceberg. Like there's so many, like application to application, device to device, device to, like all of these, everything has an identity, and all of these things are communicating and interacting. And, yes, it's bad if, a threat actor is able to use a phishing attack or something to get my, user credentials, but that's just one facet of the problem. Yeah, exactly. Identity is really a jungle. Once you really start diving deep into it, it's a mess in most organizations. Yes, there are identities that don't even belong to people. They belong to applications or systems that are talking to other systems. But even people, human users, they have multiple identities. I mean, when you think about it, even in your personal life, you have all these identities in Google and in Facebook and in all these different applications that you're using. You have different identities, and each of them is protecting that identity specifically, right?
but they don't know about the other places where you're using an identity, maybe even with the same password. I mean, they can't know that. And the whole way that identities are treated is such a siloed approach, because wherever an identity is managed, you're trying to protect that identity specifically. There's no effective way to do holistic treatment for all of the different identities that even a specific person is using. Not to mention an organization that has thousands of users and systems and so on. It's really becoming a pretty complex problem. But I agree with you, it is a critical one, because attackers also know that this is kind of the weakest link, and that's where they are focusing for years now. They know that if they can just get your identity, your credentials, they can log in through the front door. They don't even need to overcome all the different security controls. They just go in through the gate.
So and part of the reason that I said many years ago that I felt like identity was the kind of the foundation was, this goes back many years, but with all of this focus on, inside, like us versus them, the kind of the old school perimeter defense, castle and moat type approach, where you say, okay, well, we're good guys, but we just need to keep the bad guys out. And I was like, okay, but what do you do when the bad guys log in as one of the good guys? It's like, and so it's like, and so at the point of attack, they're all insider attacks. At the point of attack, the threat actor is logging in as a known good person, account. So you have to take your approach to defending against that differently.
This is exactly the change in approach that I think is also the core of what people talk a lot about in the recent years, which is zero trust security. Somebody asked me to explain it in less complex terms than I think what most vendors are using, and I thought the best analogy is until a few years ago, we took an approach where users are innocent until proven guilty, right? So we assume that they're okay unless they're doing something fishy, something that looks like a threat. And the reason for that is that for many years people have been logging in from the physical office. So they went to the person at the door, and they had to verify who they are with a tag at the door. And then once they're in the office, you could really assume that they're probably who they say they are. So as we moved over the last years to a world where everybody's working from anywhere and using devices that are not necessarily corporate devices, and you really don't know. We had to move to an approach where users are guilty until proven innocent. So you have to assume that it's not them unless they can verify who they are, and that is really the zero trust approach.
Right.
I think is a bad name, a bad term, but still.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine that I talked to a few years back about that, where we were talking about zero trust, and he was like, well, it's not zero trust. He's like, you can't do anything if you don't have trust. There has to be some trust. So it's maybe highly restrictive trust, very limited trust, but at some point you still have to give trust. Otherwise, no communication happens.
I think the whole idea is how to gain trust. That's it. It's not about zero trust. It's about a way to gain trust in your users, so that you can still continue to trust them even in this chaotic world where you don't know where they're coming from and who they are.
Right.
And I think that identity became, in many ways, the last line of defense in doing that, because if people are not in the physical office anymore, then network security is a little less relevant, right? And if they're not using a corporate device necessarily, then endpoint security becomes a little less effective to rely on. And if you think about it, if I can log in from anywhere in the world using any device, as long as I can prove that it's me, and then I'm part of your organization, I can access all your sensitive things, then identity is really the last line of defense. That's the one only remaining thing that we still have. And that's why identity is becoming such a hot topic today, even though it's one of the oldest elements of IT and security, right? But only now I feel like it's finally getting proper treatment in the last few years. By the way, when we started 8 years ago, it wasn't the case. People I mean, investors and others, they didn't fully agree with us that this is actually important.
Well, and I think that there's a huge Venn diagram overlap of these different things, but like when I think of zero trust, just to stay on that topic real quick, to me it's like if you merge identity security with behavioral analytics, like UEBA kind of stuff, because I used to say, like, how hard is it if that Tony Bradley has valid credentials to log into this account and access these this sensitive information. Fine. So Tony Bradley logs in. But you also know that Tony Bradley is in Houston, Texas, and generally logs in Monday through Friday during regular business hours. Maybe he works late on occasion. But if you suddenly see Tony Bradley log in from Singapore on Saturday at 3 a.m., that should be a simple, a very simple block. like don't let that happen.
Exactly. I think that this, as well as many other concepts of identity security, have been around for a long time now. Okay, that's the thing. So what you're mentioning now, as well as controls like multi-factor authentication and privileged access management, and all these things, they've been around for a long time. So the question that I think, at least we asked when we started this, is why is it not working? Why do we still have so many of these attacks? I mean, we still see more than 80% of data breaches using compromised identities. So what is the problem? And we started by believing that maybe those kind of controls that we're talking about are just not good. Maybe they're not actually securing you. I don't think that's the case. I think that they are actually pretty effective. And what we found that actually only became apparent to us through this journey, okay, we didn't know that when we started the company, was that one of the main reasons why identity security is not effective is the way that it's built in silos in so many organizations. And I think the root issue of that is that identity itself, the identity infrastructure, is very fragmented and built in silos. I mean, companies have their on-premise identity systems, right, like Active Directory.
Right.
And they have their cloud identity on like, Okta or Entra ID. And maybe they have another cloud, and maybe they acquired a company that has some other identity product. So every employee might have a few different identities, and every one of these identity management solutions can provide some security features, but only within its own island, without even knowing about the other identities and what the user, the same person, right, is doing over there. So we believed, or we discovered over time, that is a problem that in many ways prevented identity security from being effective over the years, even though it was already there. It was just done in very small parts and siloed parts of the organization instead of holistically.
Well, and in a lot of organizations, I mean, I think this has changed for sure, but traditionally identity and access wasn't necessarily even a security domain. It was an IT domain. It was a HR domain. It was, we're just granting, we're giving credentials so that people can get their jobs done. And then it was, the security team's job to try and defend and protect that. But it was like, they were like separate things.
I think you're touching on really one of the most important reasons to why identity security is only now truly emerging, even though identity is a very old thing. And it's really because identity infrastructure and identity security were always mixed up together. So identity was never treated fully as a separate security element. It was always, as you said, like an IT or an HR kind of thing. And I think the reason for that is that identity started before there was cybersecurity. I mean,
right.
From the moment we had a computer with a username and a password, I mean, if you think about it, that's already, I mean, the username was your identity management and your password was your identity security, but they were kind of mixed up together in the same product. And then for years, we continued to accept the fact that security is just a feature in your identity management solution that is an IT product, and security is just a feature there. But if you think about it, that's not the case in other categories of cybersecurity that evolved later. Think about endpoint security. you don't buy that from Lenovo and Apple and HP, right? Like as a feature in their endpoints. You buy that as a separate standalone security product that can operate on top of all the endpoints. That's also why you buy cloud security from certain companies, and not just as a feature in each cloud, but as a cloud security product. But identity never got that proper treatment. It was always there was always a security feature within your infrastructure, so it was handled by infrastructure people. I think that now people realize that. They understand that identity is a huge attack surface. They understand that it cannot be treated as an afterthought. I mean, security for that could not. And I think finally identity security is decoupling from identity infrastructure. I think that's a critical thing for us as an industry to finally address this problem.
Right. Well, and I think it follows the same trajectory as like pretty much everything in technology, which is, something comes out, everyone adopts it, it becomes mainstream, it's everywhere, and then we look back and go, oh wait, we need to protect that, we need to secure that.
Yeah.
It's always kind of an afterthought. And when it comes to I worked as a network admin and as a cybersecurity architect, and so I know from the network admin perspective, and again, this kind of is before security was nearly the focus that it is now, but quite simply, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So like the people coming to you saying, hey, I need access, I need access, I need access, you just give them access so they'll shut up. and then you don't. We didn't have policies in place to routinely go back on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever basis and go, hey, are you still using that access or should I revoke that? So then you end up with all these like zombie accounts just sitting out here because there's no squeaky wheel. There's no one coming to you saying, hey, you need to close this account down.
There's so many of these issues in companies that are now finally looking at identity security properly, and we talk to them and we try to help them, and we find such like tech debt of, like, as you say, people that had all kind of privileges on different systems that they needed 10 years ago and nobody ever removed, or accounts they're not even using, nobody's using them but they have high privileges. Or they're using like old insecure authentication protocols and nobody even knows about it. Shadow admin privileges, which is basically something that allows you to do a lot of very risky things even though you're not considered an admin. There's just a lot of these things, just basic hygiene stuff that isn't there.
Right.
But then also the security controls that every company needs today, like even the most basic stuff like multi-factor authentication. I mean, there's a lot of awareness to that. I think people know, even people that don't work in cybersecurity, they know two-factor authentication from like their bank account or their social media account, right? They're not aware that in most companies, there's so many systems that don't support that, those kind of security controls. They're just built with a simple password mechanism. So there's so many blind spots where identity security, even though these controls have been around for 20 years ago, they're not there. They're not there in all the different systems that you have, or even if they are, it's like a different control for every system. And what we're trying to do, or have been working on for years now, is just because the identity infrastructure is so fragmented and it's such a mess, it doesn't mean that identity security has to be, right? I think that we can theoretically really decouple that and think about identity security as a layer on top, as something that just needs to secure all these different systems, all these different environments, all the different types of identities, as you said, humans, non-humans, privileged users, non-privileged users. I think only when we do that holistically, we can actually solve the problem, because again, those identities live in so many different places and they suffer from so many different limitations in each different system. It has to be solved in a much more generic way, which really requires almost like rethinking the whole concept of identity security. It's not what we did for 20 years is not going to work anymore.
Right. Well, and it seems to me that when you talk about all the different things, on-prem, cloud, different SaaS apps, and the notion of having like a unified identity, a unified approach to managing that, it reminds me a little bit, like we've had the same conversation, in years past regarding just endpoints and just the visibility. So like visibility, became a hot topic like 4 or 5 years ago, where everyone was talking about comprehensive visibility, because it's like, okay, well, now you've got, devices on-prem, you've got people working from home, you've got people over here logging in, you've got people logging in from their mobile devices, and it's like all of a sudden you have this like very widely dispersed, complex attack surface that you don't even know where half of it is.
Exactly. And now imagine that every endpoint would have its own type of endpoint security features that are only for that type of laptop. That is the case in identity. That is where the reality is today in identity. It's every type of identity, every type of system may have its own identity security features. So it's such a mess that fixing that is really a complex task. It's
Right.
changing the way that these things were built for so long. Where I think in newer areas of security, like cloud security, even endpoint security, I think things were built more properly from the beginning. So identity, by the way, that's one of the reasons why when we started the company, it was hard to even raise money for a startup in identity security 8 years ago. I mean, now it's a hot topic, but 8 years ago, people said, hey, it's an old market, identity. Everything has been done, all these systems are there. So I think we are reaching the point, as you said, where it finally is ready for disruption. It's ready for, okay, we've been doing it. It's like, it's too old. It's not going to be relevant for the new reality where people are working from anywhere and there's so many identities out there, and we need to reinvent the whole thing. But it's, so for us, it's like a very exciting time because we finally feel like the world and the market understand the importance of identity security and also the fact that it has to be done in a different way.
Well, and like I said, the visibility is important. Like the ability to like, somehow identify like, okay, what accounts are out there that I may not know about. I mean, go back a few years, with Colonial Pipeline and them getting hit with a ransomware attack because of a zombie VPN account they forgot about.
Exactly.
That kind of thing, is what organizations need to be worried about. And again, I think it remains a problem that most organizations have much like more refined and expedited processes for granting access to things, and don't do as good of a job of limiting or revoking that access after the fact.
Because I think there wasn't enough awareness. Even Colonial Pipeline, which is a great example, I don't think that people at the time thought about this as an identity security problem, right? But when you think about it, think about ransomware. If ransomware compromises one device, one endpoint, to most companies, that's not a huge damage. One endpoint gets encrypted, that's fine. What makes it such a disaster is the fact that from that endpoint, the attacker is able to spread to all the others, right? All the other computers, all the other servers. That's what really causes the massive damage. And that's all identity. That's always done by finding an identity and using that identity to just log into all the other computers. That's what happened in Colonial Pipeline. That's what happens in so many of these data breaches. But people never thought about this as an identity issue. They thought about the ransomware itself as the issue. So they were focused on, okay, how do we prevent the ransomware from hitting that one device? And I think that finally people are realizing, okay, one device is going to get compromised. It's like it might happen no matter what we do. But if we can secure identity and access, we could limit it to that one device. I'll give you an example. Just a couple of months ago, we had one of our customers get hit by an attack group called Scattered Spider. It's the group that attacked MGM also. So it's another, Fortune 500 company that works with us, financial organization. They had Scattered Spider in their network already. So we're able to compromise an account with privileges. But because of the way our solution works, they couldn't spread anywhere. So they couldn't actually cause damage to that company. And even though they were in the network, no real damage was done. They couldn't move anywhere. And that, I think, is something that people historically never thought about as something that identity security can achieve. But it really can. You can actually prevent someone from spreading across your network, because that's how they always do it.
Right. Well, and also I think organizations need. So a lot of times we put a lot of responsibility on users, and I'm not saying users shouldn't have some responsibility for being able to not click on phishing links or protect their credentials, etc. But at the same time, they're not security professionals, and so it's like you can only hold them accountable to a certain extent, and then the security still needs to do its job. But there's a report that just came out. I'm trying to think of who did it, but it was they said 78% of people are using the same password for more than one account. 52% are using it for 3 accounts or more. Yeah. I have to say, personally, I'm guilty. I've always had this philosophy of segregating my accounts. Like, these are the accounts that I don't care if you hack. Like, if you hack into my Pizza Hut account, I don't care. Like different retail accounts like that. I'm like, I don't have my credit card stored there. All whatever information you can get from that is already publicly available. So I'm okay using the same password. Now, banks and credit cards, that's different. I'm gonna use unique passwords. And the thing is, I have a password manager, and I've used LastPass, I've used Keeper. I'm currently using 1Password. I think they all suck on some level, because I feel like I'm constantly having to log back into them, and for somehow or another, those tools also don't know the current password half the time. So I'm still constantly having to reset passwords because my password manager doesn't know the password.
One of the critical things about identity security, it has to be very convenient, because it's one of the areas of cybersecurity that really meets the end user more than any other element of cybersecurity. So we have to make it very easy. But I'll tell you something else about what you said about people using, weak password or the same passwords across different systems. And yes, a lot of people are responsible like you, and they kind of have a strategy, and they separate and they think about it. But as a company, as an employer that has 5,000 employees, that's not very reassuring, because it's enough that a few of them are not responsible and are using those same passwords at work that they use at home for their private applications. And I'm going to get compromised because an attacker only needs one of my employees to do this mistake. That's the problem of that companies have, as opposed to individuals. It's enough for the attacker to find one that will make the mistake. And I think that we all know for years now that password is just not good enough. We need some type of protection on top, like multi-factor authentication or other methods. Part of it is also visibility, like you said. We need to, even if somebody compromised one of the accounts, we need to be able to know about it, detect it, respond to that in real time. AI is not going to make it easier, right? Because with the AI revolution, attacks are going to become more automated, much faster. So we're going to need to be able to identify compromised accounts in real time and prevent their use in real time. It's not going to be enough to just send you an alert, because the attackers are just going to be too fast, too automated using AI. So I mean, it's a race, right? It's interesting, but I do think that the identity market is finally evolving to meet these challenges after years of being behind the attackers.
Right. Well, and like I said, when it comes to identity security for individuals, especially for consumers, making it as frictionless as possible is sort of a requirement, because people will just not do it if it seems too complicated. Now, that said, I've also said for years that people need to get over themselves on that front and implement the two-factor, implement the multi-factor, because yes, it adds 10 seconds to logging in, but the alternative is getting compromised. My brother just had his email compromised recently, and the attackers hijacked his Facebook account, his Instagram account, and started sending out crypto scams and whatever else, because he didn't have any two-factor authentication on his email. I mean, I get, not regularly, but not infrequently, I get notices from Facebook and other things where they're like, hey, we saw that you tried to log in, please enter your code. And I'm like, yeah, that wasn't me. And the thing is, I do have those set up, but it would be helpful if it got easier or more streamlined still, because I have some things that want to, text me a code, many things that want to send me a code via SMS. I've got things that are using Microsoft Authenticator, things that are using Google Authenticator, so when I get the request, I have to first kind of go, okay, which of these like 5 different things do I have is the right one to authenticate?
So one of the things that we do at Silverfort is we help really unify that experience across all the different systems that the company has, right? The on-prem ones, the cloud ones, all the different clouds, all the types of identities. So it is easier now because you can just, you have one experience and you don't need to do it again and again throughout the day. The other thing is a lot of very critical systems don't support even these most simple controls like multi-factor authentication. So a lot of very critical systems like some of the applications that just happen to be a little older, or maybe things like remote access to servers, or industrial systems or medical systems. There are all kinds of critical resources that don't support these controls. They are built with just a password. So one of the other things we do is we have a way to enable these security controls even on those systems without modifying them. That was one of the things that attracted a lot of our early customers, is the fact that we could bring identity security to any system, even these ones, and to any identity, even the non-human identities or the identities that are very difficult to protect. We have ways of protecting them. I think it's mostly just about bringing identity security everywhere, because I think we and also a lot of companies now understand that it's a priority. Also, luckily for us, a few years ago we had to convince people of that. Now, there are more regulations. Even cyber insurance is now require you to protect identities as a requirement, if you want to get insurance. So I think people understand more and more that they need to solve the problem. They just didn't have an easy and an effective, holistic way to do it. Right. And that's why I think we really build something that is really the leading platform in that, in really bringing identity security everywhere.
Well, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like this is another area of cybersecurity that has ultimately benefited from the pandemic, from the COVID, because as everyone went remote and worked from home, it forced organizations to kind of rethink their security posture. It forced organizations to take another look and go, oh, wait a minute, so any organizations who were still left at the beginning of 2020 stuck in the perimeter security castle and moat mind of thinking and thinking, okay, well, I don't need to worry so much because everyone's sitting in this office. All of a sudden they had to go, oh, wait a minute, I need to have better identity security because now anyone can be logging in from anywhere.
Exactly. So working from anywhere has definitely changed the way people, they understand now better that they have to secure identity and access. Moving to the cloud has done the same because it's now not necessarily in your physical data center anymore. The use of IoT and the use of personal devices, bring your own device kind of policies. All of these things have changed the way people think about identity and access. And I think organizations now understand there's a problem. It's just that they thought until now that it's a problem that is too complex to solve because, again, you have so many systems, so many types of identities. They had to combine, 5, 6, 7 different products just in order to solve this problem. And I think the next step in evolution is that, platforms, and this is really what we are focused on, end-to-end platforms of identity security will just take care of this whole problem instead of solving small pieces of it. So, one platform that solves identity security on-prem, in the cloud, humans, machines, privileged, non-privileged, all these different things from one product. I mean, in other categories of security like endpoint or cloud or network, it already happened years ago. But in identity, it's only now finally happening. So it's a pretty exciting time to be in identity security after years of identity security being just, features in 10 different products. It's really becoming a standalone platform.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of challenges to overcome. Still a lot of things that we and all the companies in this market need to do. But it's exciting. It's really I think one of the most interesting problems in cybersecurity today.
Yeah. Well, let's look forward a bit. In terms of current trends, where do you see identity going, and what impact, it's touched everything in the world. So what impact do you think, generative AI is going to have on this problem or the solution?
So I think that generative AI, first, as I mentioned, will have a lot of impact on the problem, because identity, compromising identities will become much easier. I mean, I can call you and make you believe that I'm calling from IT. I can sound like your boss, and I can send you phishing emails that are much more reliable, because all of it is so customized and tailored with AI now. And this will only improve. But then also the attacks themselves will become more and more automated, faster and faster. So, cybersecurity teams will have no time to look for alerts, investigate, respond. It will all happen in seconds. But AI can also be a big part of the solution, and we're leveraging it a lot. It can help identify those threats where normally you have so much data coming from your cybersecurity tools that it's impossible to handle. I think that with the use of AI, you can actually digest this data and actually find those threats in real time and react automatically in real time. So it's going to be an arms race of both sides to leverage AI. The other big thing that I think will happen in identity is that, as I mentioned, I believe that identity infrastructure and identity security will really decouple as two different categories. I don't believe that it will make sense for each of the different identity management solutions to continue to do security locally only within their own island. I think that there will have to be, kind of neutral end-to-end security platforms for identity that are agnostic to which infrastructure you're using, just like there are for cloud or for endpoint or for network. So that's another big change. I also think that there's a lot of focus now, and rightfully so, on non-human identities and how to secure them, because we've been securing or trying to secure human identities for many years. I think that finally the world is realizing that non-human identities or machine identities that are used by machines to talk to other machines or applications to applications, they are becoming a priority because they can't do multi-factor authentication. They don't have good thumbs, so they need to. You need a different approach. You need a way to secure those. And a lot of companies, and we've been doing this for years, but a lot of new companies are starting to tackle this problem too. But I think that all of this will also go through some consolidation.
Right.
Just like in any market, there will not be. I don't think that in a few years from now there will be different solutions for multi-factor authentication and privileged access management and identity threat detection and response and non-human identity security. All of these things, all of these features will just kind of converge into a platform, into something more consolidated, as part of just this market maturing. But I think that's what customers need.
Right. Well, I agree with you. So yeah, I mean, I think if we go, take this all the way back to the beginning of the conversation when you talked about how, traditionally identity was, has been addressed in these silos. The word holistic is overused in cybersecurity, but the idea makes sense. The idea is logical to say, so even if you go back a couple of years, Gartner put out their CTEM report for continuous threat exposure management, and where they basically were like, well, look, you've got your endpoint security, it's doing fine over here doing its thing. You've got a firewall, it's doing fine doing its thing. You've got vulnerability scanners, they're doing fine. Like, all of these tools do their jobs relatively effectively. However, none of them by themselves is sufficient. You need the whole thing. And I made the analogy at the time of that it's like it's like having a toolbox. Like a hammer is great at being a hammer, and a screwdriver is great at being a screwdriver, and a saw is great at being a saw, but you can't build a house with any one of those tools. You need all of those. And so across the board, whether we're talking about endpoint security, whether we're talking about network security, whether we're talking about identity security, that trend is the prevailing trend to say, well, we need to break down the silos. We need to look at the whole threat landscape. We need to look at the whole attack surface and manage it as one, because attackers are very good at just finding the weak link. That if I say, okay, well, I've got very effective security over here, and then the attacker just goes, okay, but I can just come in over here. So whatever.
Exactly, and I also think that there's a lot of tension in general between wanting to get best of breed solutions that solve in the best way possible some of these small problems, or big platforms that do everything but maybe not as well. I kind of view the market around us in 3 layers. It's like this kind of trade-off where you have the startups that are doing very specific things. Maybe in our case it could be non-human identity security, or ITDR, which is identity threat detection and response, or multi-factor authentication, or privileged access. And then you got the platforms that do something like identity security. That's what we are trying to be, right? Identity security, or you got others doing cloud security or endpoint security, some of the bigger categories. And they combine all these smaller things within those categories. And then at the top level, you got platforms that are trying to do all of cybersecurity, right? And there are a few of these, huge companies. I kind of believe that in this trade-off between, best of breed and between platforms, I really believe in where kind of we are aiming, because I believe that it's hard to imagine people trying to do all of cybersecurity with just one solution that does everything, because it's kind of like putting all your eggs in one basket. If it gets compromised or doesn't work, it's a problem. It's also hard to believe that people will buy 100 different 100 different cybersecurity products. So I think that what will probably happen is people will end up with a few big identity, an identity security platform, and a cloud security platform, and a network security, endpoint security, data security, the big elements. That's what we're trying to be, because it's hard for one solution to do everything, but it's also impossible for a company to handle 100 different products. So we have to find the balance there of what is. Again, I also don't like to say holistic, but what is a platform that is holistic enough to cover at least one big area of the problem with a solution? But no matter what you do, it will take a few different solutions to take care of cybersecurity. And our mission as an industry is for all of these solutions to also work together. I'm a big believer in just getting all these different products to integrate with each other, even if they're competitors. All the different cybersecurity tools need to work together if we really want to do service to our customers and help them.
Right. Yeah. I just had that conversation recently. I mean, obviously, platformization is a hot trend and topic. And I talked with the CEO recently about their platform and everything you just said, kind of platformization versus best of breed collection of products. And I said, well, if you go back 15 years, I feel like that was more of an either or equation. Like either you had a platform that did everything, or you had these separate tools, but the integration was so poor that you couldn't really do both.
Yes.
And now I feel like, and this isn't necessarily 100% true, but I feel like even the companies that are building platforms and saying, hey, we think it's a good idea for you to use our platform and get the whole scope of things all in our platform, they at least still have better integration than they had 15 years ago. So like, even if you have their platform, you can still pull in stuff from other tools, because that's the nature of the world today. Like, these things have to be able to talk to each other and play with each other.
Exactly. And I think that a company, a customer of ours, they cannot have so many different products that don't work together, because then an attacker will always find those blind spots, right, and the disconnect between these tools. So they have to work together. I think it's a very interesting thing, that whole platformization versus, best of breed. I think it's an interesting trend to follow. We are lucky to be able to kind of climb up from being, the early stage startup where we were obviously for years, and get to the point where we're big enough to really go for a platform play, at least in our area of identity security. It's exciting, and it's something that is a pretty interesting experience, to grow from being a startup with one product into, at the end of this year, we're going to have 7 different product modules in our platform. It's becoming a whole different type of company. Obviously, it took a few years of growing and growing the business and building a customer base and raising a lot of money, but we are finally at the point where we really believe that what we have very soon will be the most comprehensive platform in this category, which is something that a few years ago when I just started this with my co-founders, we at our best dreams we hope to maybe build a good solution for one of these sub categories, right? You can't even imagine building something big like this. But I'm glad because we started pretty early with this problem of identity security, and now that it is hot, we've already been investing in it for 8 years. So we have this opportunity to maybe build something that is really the leading platform.
Right.
It's very interesting time to be in this market and cybersecurity in general. I think that not only because of AI, but in general, everything that is happening in the world today is really making this problem even more and more important, which is really interesting to be in. Especially for me being originally from the offense side and now the defense, it's a very very interesting market to be in.
Yeah. Well, and so, I want to, wrap up and say, thank you for your time, but I also wanted to point out, that I think you're an example of the sort of maxim or whatever of, there's a lot of hard work and effort that goes into becoming an overnight success. So it's like some people might go, oh, Silverfort, I haven't really heard of them. Where'd they come from? But it's because you had the foresight 8 years ago to say, hey, this is a problem we need to fix. And now that the world is catching up, going, oh yeah, that is a problem we should fix. Suddenly it looks like you're a genius.
It definitely wasn't an overnight success, and I tell people, especially entrepreneurs who get started, it's very, very hard, harder than I imagined, and I think anyone who's going into this. Even the ones who pretend like it's super easy and everything just works easily for them, I think that it's generally just a very hard task to build a company like this, especially to this scale.
Right.
And over the last 8 years, we did work very hard to build this, even in times where people didn't understand why this is needed and why this is important. And now, luckily for us, the market is really booming for identity security, and we are in the place where we are really positioned to be a market leader. And we raised $220 million, and we're adding like more than 100 new customers every quarter. So we are actually at a size where we can go for it. We can capture that opportunity, but it's only because we spent so many years of blood, sweat, and tears trying to build this when nobody thought it's interesting, so that we can finally be in the right position when it becomes interesting. And that's I'm the last one to pretend like that's just an easy thing that we knew is coming and was super smooth. It wasn't. It took a lot of hard work and a lot of the effort of so many people. But it's great, and it's exciting to finally be in this position where we can actually be the leader of such a big category because of all that investment. So it's definitely it was definitely worth it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat. I think it was a good conversation, and I will look forward to seeing what you guys do next.
Great. Thank you very much for inviting me. Great talking to you.
I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow
TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions you'd like to see answered in future posts.